All right, welcome back to the deep dive. We love digging into the stuff that really makes a difference in our lives, and today we're tackling something I think we all constantly wonder about: the psychology of success.
Yeah, it's kind of a universal question, isn't it? Why do some people just seem to effortlessly achieve their goals while others struggle? And we've got some seriously interesting material here from you guys, a whole bunch of different perspectives on this. And we've tried to break it down into three core secrets that really set apart those who just consistently succeed from those who kind of feel like they're constantly spinning their wheels.
Exactly. And I think a lot of the answers lie in these hidden psychological factors, like the stuff that's going on beneath the surface that we don't always realize is shaping our outcomes.
Totally. And the coolest thing is once you understand these underlying dynamics, you can actually start to work with them instead of feeling like they're working against you.
All right, so if you're listening and you're like, okay, I want to get a grip on what actually drives my progress, like how does my own thinking help or hinder me in reaching my goals? Well, this deep dive is for you. We're going to break down three really crucial aspects. First, we'll look at how our own brains, even though they're trying to protect us, can actually become our biggest obstacle to success.
Yeah, then we'll get into how the environment we surround ourselves with has this crazy, powerful impact on our results, often without us even realizing it.
And lastly, we'll explore this really interesting concept of taking action before you feel ready, which might sound counterintuitive, but it can be absolutely game-changing. You ready to dive in?
Let's do it. So, that first point, right? Our brains kind of working against our success. Now, I know that might sound kind of strange, but it makes total sense when you think about what your brain's primary job actually is.
It's not exactly programmed for launching a business or writing a bestseller. It's all about survival at its core. So change, even positive change, can kind of freak it out a little bit.
Right. It sees change as a potential threat. Like, whoa, hold on, this could be dangerous.
Yeah. And to kind of bring this to life, imagine you're thinking about a big career change, right? Like you're in a job that's secure, but maybe it doesn't light you up and you're finally ready to pursue that passion you've always had in the back of your mind. What happens in your head?
Yeah, that's the key, right? Is it just pure excitement? Usually not.
No, it's usually a barrage of doubts and fears. Like, what if I fail? What if I can't pay my bills? What if I discover I'm not actually good enough at this thing?
It's like our brain throws on the emergency brake before we've even started the car.
Totally. And the material we're looking at here really emphasizes this thing called negativity bias. Basically, our brains are wired to pay more attention to the bad stuff than the good stuff, to focus on potential risks and negative outcomes, even when the odds are in our favor.
Right, and that makes sense from an evolutionary standpoint, you know? Back in the day, our ancestors had to be super vigilant about danger to survive, but that same wiring, that negativity bias, it's still with us today.
So we're basically walking around with these prehistoric brains that are constantly scanning for threats, even when we're just trying to start a new project or go for a promotion.
Exactly. So when we think about stepping outside our comfort zone, our brains are like, danger, danger. And they start flashing all these warning signs, even if the situation is totally fine. We end up seeing the pitfalls so much more clearly than the potential rewards.
So the big question then is, how do we work with this ancient wiring? How do we convince our brains that going after our goals isn't the same as running from a saber-toothed tiger?
Well, the first step, and this is way more powerful than it sounds, is simply becoming aware of those negative thoughts. Just start noticing that internal chatter. Actually pay attention to what your inner critic is saying.
Yeah, even keeping a little mental tally of the common themes. It can be super eye-opening to see what your brain tends to obsess over.
Totally. And what's really cool is that the simple act of bringing those thoughts into your conscious awareness actually starts to diminish their power.
And that leads perfectly into the next strategy, which is actively replacing those negative thoughts with more positive and realistic ones. So it's not enough to just acknowledge the negativity, you got to consciously counter it.
Like if your brain is telling you you're not qualified for this, you got to fire back with, hey, I'm totally capable of learning what I need to know.
Exactly. It might feel a little awkward at first, almost like you're trying to convince yourself of something you don't quite believe yet.
But that's the point. With repetition, you start to rewire those neural pathways and you literally change the way you think.
You're basically training your brain to look for possibilities and focus on your ability to grow rather than just getting stuck in those limiting beliefs.
Love it. And there's this super practical technique that the material talks about. It's called the 5-second rule, and it was made popular by Mel Robbins. Have you heard of this?
Oh yeah, the 5-second rule is brilliant in its simplicity. It basically plays on this idea that there's this tiny window of time, like literally 5 seconds, between when you have the impulse to do something and when your brain kicks in with all the reasons why you shouldn't.
Right, like that split second where you're like, oh, I should go for a run, or I should apply for that job. And then all of a sudden, you're flooded with excuses and doubts.
And the rule is so simple. The moment you feel that urge to act, count down from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then just do it.
Don't think about it. Just take action before your brain has a chance to talk you out of it.
Exactly. It's like a mental circuit breaker. It interrupts that overthinking cycle and helps you bypass that initial resistance.
I love that, a mental circuit breaker.
Yeah.
So for everyone listening right now, here's a little challenge. Think of one small thing you've been putting off, like maybe sending an email or making a phone call or even just opening a document you need to work on.
Right now, use the 5-second rule, count down from 5, and then just do it. See what happens to that resistance. I bet it kind of melts away.
I bet it does. It's so cool how a simple mental trick can actually help us take action. Okay, so we've talked about how our own brains can be our biggest obstacle. Now, let's move on to the second secret, which is all about the influence of our environment. And there's this quote from the material that really struck me. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Whoa, that one is a powerful statement. When you really let that sink in, it's kind of mind-blowing because it makes you realize how much our social circles shape who we are and what we achieve.
Right. Think about it. If you're constantly surrounded by people who are negative or always complaining or just generally stuck in a rut, it's going to be a lot harder for you to stay positive and motivated and move forward in your own life.
But wait, what if some of those people are like close family members?
hmm
You can't just cut them out of your life, right?
Oh, absolutely not. It's not about like ditching people you love. It's more about being mindful of the energy you're absorbing from those relationships. Maybe setting some boundaries, and then consciously seeking out other connections that are more uplifting and supportive.
So it's more about like strategically balancing your social diet, making sure you're getting enough of those positive vitamins.
I love that analogy. It's like making sure you're eating your fruits and veggies along with maybe a little bit of, comfort food now and then.
Exactly. And on the flip side, when you surround yourself with people who are driven and inspiring, who believe in you and push you to grow, it's like you've got this incredible tailwind pushing you forward.
It's so true. Their energy becomes contagious and you find yourself thinking bigger and taking more risks.
And this ties in perfectly with another concept that the material touches on,
Yeah.
the Pygmalion effect. You want to explain that one a little?
Sure. The Pygmalion effect is basically this idea that other people's expectations of us can actually influence our performance. Like if someone believes in you and treats you like you're capable of great things, you're more likely to rise to the occasion and actually achieve those things.
Like that classic example of the teacher who has high expectations for their students, and those students end up performing better.
Right. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way. But the crazy thing is, these influences can be really subtle. It's not always about direct praise or criticism. It's about the overall atmosphere of expectations that surrounds us.
So it really highlights how important it is to be intentional about the people and the environments we choose to spend our time in.
100%. So for our listeners, here's something you can try. Take a minute to really think about your social circle. Identify maybe 3 people or sources of content that consistently leave you feeling drained or negative.
And then think of 3 new positive influences you can actively invite into your life. It could be reaching out to someone who inspires you, subscribing to a new podcast, joining a community online, anything that feels uplifting and supportive.
Exactly. Curate your social ecosystem intentionally and see what shifts.
Okay, ready to tackle this last secret. The one about taking action before you feel ready. This is a big one because it kind of goes against everything we've been taught about success.
I know, right? We're always told to plan and prepare to make sure we have all our ducks in a row before we make a move.
Right, like I need to do more research. I need to take another course. I need to wait for the perfect time.
But here's the thing. Waiting for that feeling of perfect readiness can actually be a huge trap.
Because guess what? That perfect moment rarely arrives. And all that waiting just turns into procrastination and missed opportunities.
Yep. High achievers seem to get this instinctively. They understand that real learning and growth often happen during the process of doing, not just in the preparation phase.
The material actually uses Steve Jobs as a great example here. Think about it. He wasn't an engineer. He wasn't a designer. But he had this vision for Apple, and he just went for it.
Exactly. And he learned what he needed to know along the way. often by bringing in people who had the specific skills he lacked.
And that's so key. Action creates clarity. You start doing the thing, and suddenly you figure out what you need to know, and you become more resourceful, more confident, more capable.
Totally. And it helps us overcome that pesky imposter syndrome that so many of us struggle with, that feeling of, I don't really belong here, or I'm not actually good enough.
But what we have to realize is that feeling a little out of your depth is often a sign that you're actually growing and stretching yourself.
It's like if you're not at least a little uncomfortable, you're probably not pushing yourself hard enough. And the funny thing is, the more you act, the more confident you become. It's this amazing upward spiral.
So much of the time, we think we need to feel confident before we can act, but it's actually the other way around. Action builds confidence.
So true. So how do we actually put this into practice? How do we start taking action even when that little voice in our head is telling us to wait?
Well, one of the simplest but most effective strategies is to break those big, scary goals down into much smaller, more manageable steps.
Like instead of getting overwhelmed by the thought of writing an entire book, just focus on writing 1 page a day.
Exactly. Make it so easy that you can't not do it. And as you start checking off those small wins, you build momentum and confidence along the way.
And remember, done is better than perfect. That's another key takeaway from the material. That 80% done and out in the world is so much more valuable than 100% perfect and stuck in your drawer forever.
So true. Don't let perfectionism hold you back. Just start taking action, even if it's a little messy at first.
And finally, there's this really cool strategy about making a public commitment. Tell someone about your goal, maybe a friend, a mentor, or even just post it online.
Accountability is so powerful, right?
Yeah.
When you know someone's expecting you to follow through, you're much more likely to actually do it.
Totally. So here's your final challenge for today. Pick one thing you've been putting off and commit to taking the very first step today.
Don't wait until you feel ready. Just take that action. I promise it will feel amazing. Okay, so let's quickly recap those 3 psychological secrets for success. Number 1, reprogram your brain. Start noticing and replacing those negative thoughts, and use tools like the 5-second rule to overcome procrastination.
Number 2, optimize your environment. Surround yourself with positive, supportive people and content, and limit your exposure to negativity.
And number 3, take action before you feel ready. Break those big goals down, let go of perfectionism, and make a public commitment to hold yourself accountable.
Awesome. Now here's a little something to think about as we wrap up. Choose one of these 3 secrets, the one that really speaks to you the most right now, and commit to putting it into practice for the next 7 days. See what happens. Pay attention to any shifts you notice in your thinking, your motivation, or your results.
I think you'll be amazed at what even small, consistent changes can create.
And lastly, ask yourself this question. Which of these 3 secrets, if you really mastered it, could have the biggest impact on your life?
That's your invitation to go deeper, to explore, and to unlock even more of your potential. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.